Hilchos Maaser Perek Shvi, the laws of the Maaser separation, chapter 7. We're going to get into some of the laws about actually separating the Maaser, because we've been talking about which produce is obligated in Maaser. We've been talking about who can eat it. We've been talking about the tevel. That was yesterday's chapter. Untithed produce. What's the law of untithed produce? Now that Rambam gets into the actual mechanisms of separating Maaser. So he begins with the following scenario of a person. Let's read it inside. Halacha Aleph. Misha hayu le'meya lug shel yayin tovul min haTorah. A person has a barrel with 100 lug. Okay, lug is a liquid measurement. Let's call it 100 ounces. Okay, 100 lug of wine. That's tevel biblically. In other words, it's completely obligated to have its tithes taken, and nothing was taken yet. So typically, how much do we take? We take 2% for truma, 10% for the first tithe, and 10% for the second tithe. So here, the guy goes like this. He has 100 lug of wine. The Amar, and he says, Shnei lugin shani asid lahafrish mehen harehin truma. I don't want to separate the wine just yet, but I'm going to separate 2 lug. That's 2%, right? You have 100 lug. 2% is 2. 2 lug of wine that I'm going to separate is going to be truma. The asara maaser rishain. 10 will be for the first tithe, because 10% of 100 is 10. The tisha maaser sheni. And 9 is going to be for the second tithe. Why 9? Because once you take away 10, you have 90, and 10% of 90 is 9. So this is how he puts it away. See, 2 lug of truma, 10 lug of maaser, 9 lug maaser sheni. Says the Rambam, if you haven't separated it yet actively, you just said it in your mind, lo yaschil v'yishta, you can't begin and drink the wine ad sheyaniach basoif shir truma or maaser, and then leave at the end whatever amount you decided to separate. Elo yafrish v'achar kach yishta. You need to separate it first and then drink the wine.
Yeah, after that you won't have it.
Well, you could technically say, let me drink the top of the barrel, and the bottom of the barrel will be the maaser and the truma. The Rambam says no. Ve'ein oimrim, we don't say zeh shehiniach basoif ki'ilu nivrar tchila, that whatever wine he'll leave at the end, it will be retroactively clarified as if that was the wine that he put away in the beginning. We don't say that. Mipnei shechiyuv truma or maaser is min haTorah, because the obligation of separating truma and maaser is biblical. Ve'ein oimrin b'shel Torah nachshev ki'ilu nivrar ad sheyivrar. And when it comes to biblical principles, we don't say the principle of berera, retroactive clarification. No such thing as retroactive clarification. You clarify it now. So in other words, let's say nowadays, where the whole obligation would be rabbinical, there'd be room to say that in this case, you could actually begin to drink the barrel and leave whatever it is that you leave in the bottom, and retroactively it'll turn out that that was the one that you had in mind to begin with to be truma and maaser. But when it's a biblical obligation, we don't apply the principle of berera. Halacha beis hakoveya masreisa b'fi achavis. It gets even more. What if a person clearly says, the maaser for this barrel is at the top of the barrel? So he clearly said where it is. Lo yishta mishuleha. You can't drink from the bottom. You can't open a spout on the bottom and say, hey, I put away the maaser on top of the barrel, not at the bottom. Bishuleha lo yishta mipia. If you designate it in your mind or your mouth, you said the maaser is going to be at the bottom, you can't just drink from the top. Because liquids, the nature of liquid, that it's all mixed up. So you can't say there's only liquid on the top that's not mixing with liquid on the bottom. But let's say you would do it. Oh, here's the picture for the barrels, right? Put it on top, you can't drink from the bottom, bottom on top. But on a produce pile, you can do that. If somebody says, my maaser is going to be at the top of the produce pile, you could eat from the bottom. If you put it on the bottom, you could eat from the top. Why? Because obviously produce doesn't mix. It's dry goods. Dry goods don't intermingle. Halacha Gimel. So we know that the ideal way to separate maaser is to go in order. First the 2% to the Kohen, then 10% to the Levi, then 10% maaser sheni, which is the next set of laws, take it to Jerusalem. Says the Rambam, what if you don't go in order? If you don't go in order, there's a trick you can do. V'yesh la'adam likbaya maaser sheni. A person can establish which part of his produce is going to be the second tithe, upaidehu, and then you can redeem it. Because one of the ways that you can do with maaser sheni, you don't have to take the actual food to Jerusalem. What if you live too far away? You transfer the holiness to money, you redeem it, it's called, and now the produce becomes regular produce, and the coins become holy. So what you can do is, you can take from your produce, make it maaser sheni, redeem it, v'oisehu maaser rishen al oisan aperis, and then convert that very produce into the first tithe, which belongs to the Levi, for the very same produce. Or or make it trumas meiser, the 10% of the 10% to cover other produce. Point is, once you redeem meiser sheni, it becomes fully chulin, it becomes fully regular grain. Halacha dalid hamaniach peiros lies mafrish alei and meisers. A person has a pile of produce, which is his meiser pile. That means one day you put away 100 pounds of grain, and you say, from now on, whenever I bring in new crop, I'm going to calculate how much is a tenth, and I'm going to take the tenth not from that produce but from this pile here. And once the whole 100 pounds become meiser, I'm going to make a massive delivery to the Levi's door and give him all the meiser. So it's going to accumulate season by season till it all becomes meiser and it all goes to the Levi. Says the Rambam, mafrish alein becheskas shehin kayamin va'oichel v'sheisa. That's allowed. You can keep on separating in your mind, thinking with the presumption that they're still there, that grain, and eat and drink your other produce. Ad sheye'asu kol oisan aperes shehiniach meiser v'neisan levi, till it accumulates to the full amount of meiser, and you give it all to the Levi.
So what happens if there is a disaster?
Mitzah and shavdu. What if one day you go into your storehouse where you think that those 100 pounds are supposed to be, and they're not there anymore, they got destroyed. So now what happens? That's the risk. You have to now go back and worry that all the meiser that you put aside is no good. You don't take it again in a definite way, but out of doubt, you have to take meiser again for all the produce which you might have eaten, assuming this produce was here, because it's not here. So you take a risk. You're allowed to do it, but if it turns out bad, then yeah, you have to compensate. Halacha hey. Hamalve mois es hakoyin ve'es halevi ve'es ha'ani. Okay, here's the Jew. He's the rich guy. He gave a loan to a Kohen. Gave money to a Kohen, or to a Levi, or to a poor person. And he says, look, instead of you paying me back, here's what's going to happen. Lies mafrish al oisan hamois mechalkoi. I'll put aside the gifts that anyway have to go to you. Truma, Maaser, the gift to the poor. I'll put them aside, and I'll eat them. I'll consider them as payment for your loan. Then, don't pay me back the money. I'll subtract all the gifts of Truma and Maaser from my own produce to make up your loan. Says the Rambam, mafrish alein becheskas shehin kayamin. You can keep on separating and subtracting the loan, presuming that the Kohen and Levi are still alive, or the poor person is still poor. You don't have to suspect. Maybe the Kohen died, maybe the Levi died, maybe the poor person became rich. You keep on separating. Ketzad mafrish alein. And what does it mean? How does this work? How do you separate and subtract from a loan? So it goes like this. Mafrish trumai maaser rishon and maaser ani mipedaisaf. You separate regular, 2% for the Kohen, 10% for the Levi, 10% for the poor from your produce. Then you give it to somebody else, and you say, pick this up, acquire it for that Kohen or Levi or a poor person. If there's a history between them, they always get the gifts from him, he always gives it to them. You don't have to do that first step, because it's presumed that it's going to go to them. Then once you separate them, you put them aside, calculate how much is this gift worth, subtract it from the loan, till you get your entire loan. Now, the Maaser, the gift to the Levi, the gift to the poor, any regular Jew can eat. But the Truma you can't eat, so what do? You sell the Truma to whatever Kohen you want, make some money off of it, and that's the money you subtract from the loan. So you can even eat the Maaser for yourself, because a regular Jew can eat Maaser no problem. It's part of the terms here of the loan. It says that Rambam Halacha Zayin, he even gets benefits. This lender gets benefits. When he calculates how much is the worth of this produce, he can use the cheaper price. You know, in every market, today you go into a market, you have fixed prices. But in the shuk, right, what happens? You go to the market and you bargain, he bargains you down, you bargain him up, you bargain him down, he bargains you up, till you reach an agreement. So the buyer's bid is always going to be less than the seller's bid. So this guy who gave the loan can calculate the worth of the produce at the lower rate. You don't have to worry that that's considered interest, as though because of the loan you're getting a cheaper rate. No, Torah allows you to do that. Also, Shemitah, which usually cancels all loans, doesn't cancel this loan. If the owner wants to retract on the loan, he can't retract. But if the Kohen or the Levi or the poor person want to retract on the terms of the loan, they could. So it works to their benefit as well. If the owners gave up of getting back the loan, then they can't continue to separate Maaser, because you don't separate on that which was lost. Now what does it mean you lost the loan? If they're still there, they're going to pay you back the loan. So Rashi in the Talmud explains that you made up with the guy that he's going to pay you back from, or you're going to get yourself paid back from the produce of a specific year. And that year, there was a very bad year. So the owner publicly despaired. He's like, I'm never going to get my money back. And then, by miracle of miracles, his field produced produce. So over here, because he gave up, so you can't separate the Maaser for the given up produce. If the Kohen or Levi or poor person died, it doesn't automatically pass to their heirs. You can't keep the terms of the loan up with the heirs unless they agree to it. And even then, the father has to have left them some real estate, even the smallest amount, but some real estate. But if he only left money, cash, the fact that it passed over to the heirs doesn't help, because in halacha, loans only pass from father to son if there's land attached, because the land carries the lien. No land, no lien. If the loan was made in court with the stipulation he's going to separate money, no need to even get permission from the heirs, because in court it's considered solidified. Of course, if the poor person becomes rich, no longer can you separate the Maaser to subtract from the loan, because he's not poor anymore. He can't get the Maaser, even if the loan was made in court. And the guy gets what he gets. Whatever he holds in his hand, didn't pay back, he wins. Halacha ches. Yisrael sha'amar leben Levi. Here's a regular Jew, here's the Yisrael, talking to the Levi. And he says to the Levi, Kor Maaser yesh lecha biyadi. I have a whole core, it's a big amount, of Maaser that belongs to you. Now he didn't give it to him yet. But the Levi is like, look, I have Maaser coming in. Rashai ben Levi la'asoisei trumas Maaser al makom acher. The Levi, in his head, can say, you know what, okay, all that produce I'm going to use as trumas Maaser. I have other produce that has to be tithed, given 10% to the Kohen. I'll use that produce to give the 10%. Afal pisha le'mashach, even though he never pulled it into his possession, he doesn't really own it, he can still do that. However, the Yisrael can always back out. If the Jew ends up giving the Maaser to somebody else, the Levi only has complaints. No legal complaints, only, frustration. It's too bad. He didn't promise to give it to him, he didn't take it, so it's too bad on him. Halacha tes misha hayulei peiros b'megura. A person has produce in a pile. V'nasan sa'ala Levi or sa'ala ani. And he gives one sa'ah to a Levi as Maaser Rishon, one sa'ah to a poor person as Maaser Ani, but he hadn't yet put aside the produce from which he was separating this Maaser. So therefore, a person might think, Lo yafrish shmeinish se'in min ha'megura v'yoichle, you can't go take 8 sa'ah and eat it, because you'll say retroactively, right? If I have 10 sa'ah, one goes to the Levi, one goes to the poor person, the rest I can eat. But here you first took the gifts, and then you're taking your produce. That doesn't work. Unless you're sure that the 2 sa'ah which you separated are still intact. But if a Levi or the poor person already ate from them, you can only take out fresh produce and eat it proportional to what's left. Because that's how you're supposed to go the other way around. You're supposed to put away the produce, then give the gift. Here you gave the gift, you can only take for yourself what's left from the gifts. Halacha Yud Aniyim shehechlifu matnesein in balabayis. Poor people, we saw in the set of laws about poor people, they get different gifts in the field, right? Leket, shikha, peah, the fallen stocks, the forgotten stocks. Forgive all the noise, they're working upstairs. So usually the gifts of the poor in the field are very cheap quality. So they came to the owner of the home and they switched it in for better grain. He was nice to them. They gave him a sa'ah of fallen stocks, forgotten stocks, corner of the field, gift to the poor, and then they take a regular sa'ah from the grain pile. Says the Rambam, even though the guy is being generous, What he takes from them is exempt from being tithed, because all the gifts to the poor don't have to be tithed. And what they take from him has to be tithed. Even though it's the exchange of their gifts, which are exempt, but they're obligated. Person has two baskets of tevel fruit. Truma was separated, Maaser was not. The Omar, and he says, Maaser zu bezu. The Maaser for one is in the other. Says the Rambam, Harishayna me'useres. The first one is considered tithed. Very good, right? The Maaser for one is in the other. So this one has the Maaser for this one, and you can go home and eat this one. Omar Maaser zu bezu vezu bezu. If you said double, I want this Maaser to be in here, and this Maaser to be in here, so the first one is good, because you've established its Maaser in the second one. But the second one doesn't get tithed by the first one. Because you can't take Maaser from the first one, which already became exempted, for the second one, which is still obligated to have Maaser separated from it. Right? That was in chapter 1. You can't take min ha'ptur ala chiyuv, from discharged produce onto still obligated produce. Halacha Yud Beis. What if you didn't say it in two sentences? You didn't say this one here, this one here. You said it all together. Maaser shtei kalkalis elu, Maaser kol achas mehen kavua bechaverta. The Maaser for these two baskets, the Maaser of each one is established in the other. Karashem ukvar kava Maaser seyen bahen. So that works. It's a good designation. The Maaser is established. Umoitzi ha-Maaser shalahen, and simply take out the Maaser. You can't take Maaser from somewhere else, but from these two baskets it works. How do you take Maaser from these two baskets? You take the Maaser for both of them from one basket or from each one individually, if they were the same size. If one was larger than the other, you take from the smaller one the Maaser for the larger one, and from the larger one the Maaser of the smaller one, because your sentence implies that you want to take one from the other. So if you can do that, you do that.